Get ready for an inspiring conversation with one of our clients, Cara Houser, and how she turned her signature talk into a best-selling book on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. You know that speaking and books go hand in hand. Most authors are also public speakers, and many public speakers have books. What does it look like to take your thought leadership message and your signature talk and turn it into a book, especially a best-selling book? That's exactly what I talk about with one of our Thought Leader Academy graduates, Cara Houser. Cara recently published her book called Burned Out to Lit Up, Ditch the Grind, and Reclaim Your Life. And it is a fantastic book, really well written. And Cara digs deep into her own personal stories and into those hard-won life lessons and shares them in the book. Now, she started refining her thought leadership message when she went through our Thought Leader Academy last year. And so she shares a bit about that process and how it helped her to refine her message, not only for her public speaking, but then eventually into the book that she just published. We also dig into her writing process, the book launch, and how she marketed the book to make it a bestseller. If you would like to work with us on developing your thought leadership message and creating your signature talk, along with learning the business of speaking, this is exactly what we do in our Thought Leader Academy. In the Thought Leader Academy, you get a one-on-one virtual VIP day where we work with you to create your signature talk from beginning to end using our proven framework. You also get weekly group Zoom calls with a community of women so that you're learning from each other and supporting each other while we provide mini trainings and feedback on what you're working on. You can get all of the details, including pricing, at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. We are enrolling now for our January start date, so now is the time to invest in yourself for 2024. You can either enroll directly or you can schedule a Zoom call with me. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome back to the Speaking Your Brand podcast, Cara.
So happy to be here, Carol. Thank you for having me. It's just a delight to be chatting with you.
Well, likewise. And you were on this podcast back in November of 2022, so just over a year ago, where we were doing our series around the 4 speaker archetypes. And you are the provocative performer speaker archetype. During your graduation from the Thought Leader Academy, I remember you brought out your guitar and you even sang us a little song, which was so much fun. So for listeners, definitely go back and check out that episode with Cara and the entire series around the speaker archetypes. But what I want to talk to you about today is your new best-selling book. I have it here. So for those of you watching the video on the show notes page, you can see it's beautiful. Like the whole book, the cover is beautiful. It's called Burned Out to Lit Up, Ditch the Grind, and Reclaim Your Life. And I have so enjoyed reading this book. I love your writing style. Your storytelling is so powerful. I mean, just the way that you write is so clear and engaging. So I want to know, Cara.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, no, I really do. I do not say that about every book that I read, even book by well-known authors. I don't necessarily like their writing style, but I really like yours. So let's start with, first, let's tell us about what is Burned Out to Lit Up. What does that mean? And then why did you decide this was the message you wanted to put out there?
Okay. First of all, thank you. That's high praise. I'm blushing over here. What is Burned Out to Lit Up? It is the journey from soul-crushing burnout to joy-filled, full-bodied, rich, delicious living. And, burnout the notion has almost become so kind of overused and bland. People are like, oh, burned out, whatever, isn't everybody? Who cares? And it's actually really common. I talk about it in the book. The statistics are up to 89% of people this year in 2023 report having felt burned out in the last year in the US, which is crazy. It's an epidemic, And why did I decide that this was going to be the thing for me to do? It was sort of a people ask me, it's like a funny story. Okay, so Cara, how long did it take you to write this book? And I say, well, if you count the beginning of the lessons I had to learn to have something to say that was useful about it, 10 years. If you say all of the starting to structure it and put it together and really organize it and do all the thought leadership pieces like I learned with you, I would say 2 years. And the actual writing, editing, and getting it done once really the rubber hit the road was fast, like 6 months.
Okay, that it seems pretty typical and very doable, I think, for people who are listening.
Absolutely, it is. Oh, and like they say, this is true for me and for anybody. I mean, you got to write about what you know about, and I call them lessons learned the hard way, which is really just lessons learned by actually living life, right? When you write about those, you can write about them in a really authentic and engaging way. You mean it, you've been there, you've learned it. And in my case, I learned it and experimented with a bunch of stuff, but I am also just like a super reader and a super sort of student too. And so I just test drove every single thing out there I could think of or Google to find to try to help get myself out of this burnout hole I was in all those years ago. And I've looked back all those years later, and although I'm not all that pumped and grateful for those dark days, I am grateful that I was able to look back and really put together what I now think is a pretty good roadmap, guidebook, really recipe that folks who are so burned out that they can't even figure out step one to get out of it it's very approachable. They can get in there and know, okay, there's a process, there's hope. I don't have to always be like this. I can heal,
Yes. And you mentioned a few things, Cara, that I think are important for listeners to think about for their own thought leadership. So I talk quite a bit about these different thought leadership layers. So the first layer is kind of like your expertise, or kind of like what is the main thing you talk about. The second layer is your big idea. So your framework or process and that's unique to you to get the audience, the readers or the people in your audience that you're speaking to, get them to where they want to go. And then most people stop there. And those are the books and the presentations that are kind of generic and anodyne and kind of like, okay, I feel like I've heard this before, because people have heard about burnout. They may have even read books or listened to podcasts about burnout. But then that third layer is your personal story, your personal experiences. And then the last layer on top is the emotional courage to dig deep. And as I say, to share things that you may not necessarily want to share, that maybe even feel like a little bit embarrassing to you. And I feel like but that's what makes the work that we put out much more relatable.
Well, I'm no exception. I mean, I felt super vulnerable. And in fact, the day that I actually sent it out, because I didn't have, and nobody read it before it went out to my my launch team, my kind of group of awesome pre-readers, except my editors. And so the day I sent it to those folks was like the day it kind of went to the world, like family, friends, colleagues, and inner circle folks. And I had like some kind of like a mini panic attack. I was like, it just felt very scary to me. And because, you put stuff out there and you're like, oh, what are people going to think? And I talk about this in the book. And at my age, like mostly I don't really care. But also when you put that much of your, like, I don't know, love and life into something, you do kind of hope that it hits the mark, which is that it's resonant with people, that it helps people, that they get it, and that it feels useful, And
I feel like you have done that. And your book starts off with a very personal story about kind of that inciting incident, the realization that you had reached a place in your life with burnout where it was not only was it not sustainable, but it really even wasn't safe for you and for your family. And so I'm not going to spoil it for those, please, all of you listening, please go get Cara's book. Really, you will love it. Even if you don't feel burnt out right now, you will learn so much from reading the book, and then it will hopefully help you now and in the future. But to your point, like, it was a very vulnerable story that you started off with. Yet, of course, as I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, like, Cara is so courageous to put this out there so
Mhm.
that those of us, because we kind of think of ourselves like, oh yeah, I've had those moments too, or, not those exact situations, but I've had moments in my life where something has happened where I'm like, oh, this is not working anymore.
Right. Yep. And for most people, well, two things. One, I didn't know I was burned out either. And, it, I came to use that terminology later after having kind of healed and processed. I was like, oh, that's kind of what was going on. I just, I was going 100 miles an hour for so long, like a lot of people do. And my sort of stress set point was so high that it seemed normal to me. I just didn't, until I had an emergency, like I talk about in the book, and this is true for a lot of other people too, unfortunately, we just kind of keep going along, grinding ourselves to a charcoal little nub until finally something really serious happens. And it kind of like smacks us to attention to where we finally have to pay attention to all the signs, quite frankly, that our bodies and minds have been feeding us probably for a long time, through illness, through whatever. It's probably not that big of a mystery if we look back. But when you're sitting in your own soup of despair and just, I don't know, overwhelm, it's really hard to see that.
Yeah, yes, that's a really great point, Cara. Well, hopefully for everyone reading the book and then listening to this, they will recognize it sooner for themselves.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yes, and
And I
because
do think the book, sorry,
yeah,
it helps with prevention and recovery. Yeah.
yes, I've been learning a lot from it myself. Just to even just like recognize what is going on in our
Mhm.
bodies and in our minds, and whether it's like clutter in our minds, we have racing from thing to thing, or from task to task, or from meeting to meeting, and then
Mhm.
how things feel in the body as you're going around your work life or your life, and kind
Mhm.
of recognizing that, oh, this thing is not making me feel good anymore
Right.
or ever.
Right. Exactly. And then letting that come to awareness such that you can then look at it for a minute, take the time and say, okay, now what? Okay, well, now I'm aware. What can I do about it? What can I shift? And that's where all the strategies in the book come in to help you actually do that. Because it's one thing to have an idea and another thing to make it sort of manifest in your life.
Yes, and I know you have very tangible things that you do with your sabbatical in a box. Can you tell
Yeah,
us a little bit about that?
that started when I first started my coaching practice. And I thought, okay, so here's what are the transitions I'm helping folks through? That's one of them, is working through burnout and then helping folks get to where they want to be on the other side of that, which could be any number of things. And so I put together a program. It's a 7-week group guided Zoom program. And it's like an online course kind of, except, we get to see each other in person. And I send everybody an actual box of beautiful goodies and then also just useful stuff like, handmade journals and this and that, so that they can actually go through the process. And then I guide them through it. And if folks read the book, it'll be very resonant because it's based on that, and it's actually iterated. So I started to do that, and after that is actually when I met you, because I knew, what, here's the next step I need to really up my level on, and that is thought leadership, public speaking. And that's how I found you. And I'm so happy I did, because your program is amazing, and really helped me refine, organize, crystallize, framework, storytell, kind of all of those pieces that needed improvement, really, and refinement. And so a bunch of the thought leadership elements that are in the book were actually really very much refined through that program. And so it's been a very, very evolving, iterative thing. It's not like, well, step one, step two. It's like I started doing this and then I did that. And then each of the things that I did fed the other things. And then once I did your program, I continued doing some workshops and the sabbatical program. And I was like, this needs to be a book. Um, and so that's how kind of all of the pieces have fed each other. But the storytelling piece is, like, I sort of already loosely knew that needed to be part of the book, right? Who wants to read a bunch of dry bullet points that someone could have, regurgitated from who knows where? It's so that's where I came to understand how essential it was, frankly, for each chapter to have an illustrative story that's like, okay, here's what we're talking about. This is the issue. Here's an illustrative story, and then here's how you could apply it to you. And that's how we have our activities at the end, so folks can go to the end and say, okay, that's nice. And how does this actually help me? And then people are able to do that.
Yeah, that is so well done. And I will say, to your point about you send the people in the sabbatical in a box program, an actual box, but you also, with your book, and I have here again, show and tell on the video. So this lovely little package came with the book that Cara sent me because I was on her launch team, and I will tell you, I'm going to share a little bit more about the marketing of the book, but it had such lovely things in here, the little gift package that, no one likes getting quote unquote gifts that feel cheap or not really useful, or you know what I mean, right?
Oh, I do.
Right.
Yes.
But all of these feel like so intentionally, purchased and thought about and high quality. And so kudos to you on finding really good gifts to include.
Thank you. Well, everything's got to be aligned, right? Everything's got to make sense together. And I don't want a whole bunch of clutter in my house either. We write about that, in the book, but I'm so grateful to you and to all the folks on my launch team who are just so generously beautiful, with their time. Everybody read the book early. Everybody went on and put a review up, candid. And then afterwards, I sent everybody, once I had my print copies, a signed one with a bunch of stuff that just felt very thematically aligned with what our whole purpose is. So, and I have to confess, I do love putting like gift stuff together. That's like some weird love language thing. I'm totally into it. So it wasn't.
You're very good at it. I'm gonna have to chat with you, give you some gift ideas for some things.
Yes,
clearly it's a talent. All right, so we talked about how obviously you have all the lived experience of the burnout, and how you recognized it and then got yourself through it. So which became the Sabbatical in a Box program that you offered online, and then you decided to go through the Thought Leader Academy with us, which we so enjoyed working with you, Cara, to kind of refine your thought leadership, learn more about how to tell great stories, kind of put together their signature talk. So you graduated, I think, in December of 2022, so about a year ago from the program, and then. So then you decided you wanted to put together a book. So tell us about that process. Did you just sit down and carve out time every day to write it? Did you have someone, like a coach to help keep you accountable? Were you really good with keeping yourself accountable? When did the editing process come in? Tell us about all that.
So it's kind of a combo. Like once I decide something is going to happen, I'm pretty good about like getting my schedule such that I get it in there and I just do it. So once I decided, probably around the end of our time together that, I felt like the thought leadership topics that I was talking about had matured to the point to where I had kind of an overarching thesis for the book, because it initially was going to be more around sabbatical themed. Which is the course. But now, as you read the title, it's really just about burnout recovery in general and ditching the grind and reclaiming your life. And it talks about a sabbatical style mindset and way of being, but it doesn't necessarily talk about how, some folks will take a literal sabbatical and some won't, and that's a piece of it. But it ended up pivoting a little bit. And part of that evolution happened with your group, because when you're meeting once a week, you can kind of bat around what all your theoretical, thinkings are. And so, I started to talk a lot with folks about, okay, we have self-neglect, we're getting over to self-care. Burnout isn't just about recovery. It's not just about self-care and like getting a massage or whatever. Okay, great. The world would love to sell us a bunch of crap we may or may not need. Like, I may not like a massage, don't get me wrong. But, that's just one thing isn't going to cut it. And so I came to understanding that it's really about self-possession, which of course is this intangible thing. And I actually remember talking about that with my cohort and you, and being like, oh yeah, that's it. That's really what it's about. And then kind of weaving that back through everything that I was already working with people on so that it was all very integrated. And anyway, so that's the first thing. And then as far as writing the book is concerned, I started looking for like different partners, people to work with on. And I first got kind of connected with some folks who ended up being a bad choice. But I kind of got started. Like they kind of help you with some really basic stuff that hopefully you're already asking yourself and stuff that you ask folks in your thing, which are, what's your message? Who's it for? How does it help them? Because if it's not helping anybody, you're just basically writing like a fun diary. And that's nice, but that needs to not be published. So like, what is the whole thing? And then they kind of just give you a little bit of a framework too, of just, I didn't need those tools so much because again, I already had this program and I kind of knew my process, but it's still nice to have different eyeballs and perspectives of like ways to bucket things and arrange things and organize things such that it's the most useful it can possibly be for people. So I went through that kind of all fell apart. And then I ended up, I knew I needed like a publishing partner. I needed editing. I needed all the graphic design, marketing, all those pieces, because although I, very much enjoy the writing and I had the content down, I would never recommend anybody edit their own stuff. You cannot, even if you're a fine language person, you need to have other and professional eyeballs on that. And they help you with kind of structuring it. And that's the first level. And then later down to copy editing and finally, your proofing so that it's a really beautiful, clean, enjoyable process for your reader at the end. And the person I found for that is named Stephanie Fager, and she's amazing. And her group is called the Empower PR Group. And they do book marketing, editing. I mean, seriously, top-notch graphic design. If I do say so myself, the cover is just gorge. And it was made by someone who's just really, really talented at it. So that's not something I ever wanted to mess around with myself.
Yeah, Stephanie is fantastic. And I'm going to have her as a guest on this podcast coming up in 2024, because I know she has so many things that she does for authors, the marketing side, like you said, the graphic design, helping with the editing, all of that. And she actually has also worked with one of our other Speaking Your Brand clients, Katie Anderson, who's been on this podcast a couple of times. So definitely awesome. We're so well aligned because obviously books and speaking go so well. They go hand in hand.
Yes.
All right. So then you wrote it, you got your drafts done, and then Stephanie and her team helped you with all of the editing, the different types of editing, the editing process, and then getting the cover design and all of that. So then I mentioned a little bit ago that I was part of your launch team. And I know you had an incredible launch team because that got you to best-selling status on Amazon through all of the reviews that come out right when the book is published, this is what authors do. The big traditional publishers, the big names, they do the same thing because they know that they needed the book to get more visibility. So how did you decide, like, how many people did you have on your launch team? How did you decide who would be a good fit? And then what was the process of, I guess, nurturing the people on your launch team to actually, to get them to what you needed them to do, but of course, what we as the launch team members wanted to do for you to support you?
This is something I put a whole bunch of effort in. It was really my biggest, I guess, marketing effort, if you want to say. I mean, because yes, I don't have like a huge marketing team of people doing God knows what. But this seemed like the right thing to do. And so for me, and so also just the highest degree of usefulness for my time, I guess. So I thought back to all the different folks in my life, some family, some friends, some colleagues, folks I'd worked with in different capacities in the past, and even people I was a little bit more loosely connected with, like folks I'd met on LinkedIn even, who I was kind of vibing with. And we were exchanging ideas and feeling supportive of each other's work in that way. So people that fell into that category, I asked personally to join the launch team in an initial email, and then gave them a sense of what it entailed, so that they could be like, is this for me? It's actually something I want to do. So I asked, I don't know, over 100 people.
Wow. That's a lot.
It is,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing it one-on-one, which I felt was important because, if you get a big old spam email, you're like, delete. Uh, just like, why am I even on here? So
Yep.
I reached out to each person individually and maybe 120 people. And yes, this was a whole thing. And about 75 people were like, yeah, I'll do it. I was like, that's amazing. I mean, of course, I'm like that. I was, of course, grateful, so grateful. So that was a few months, let's see, a couple months before it was published. And then I just, once people, let me know if they were able and wanted to be a part of it, I just kept them kind of on my list for a little bit. And then once I had like the early copy for them to read, then I kind of started the whole process of essentially a few weeks before the book's published. You get a copy into everyone's hands, a digital copy, and then you ask everybody to go on Amazon and pre-order your Kindle version, at like a super early bird price, and just so that Amazon knows they're a real customer and not like some random person. And so, even though they already have the book, so they have it, they've read that version, and then the idea is that right when it's published, like within that first week, they go on and write a brief and candid review, and also just kind of reach out to their network, because now they've already read it, they've already come up with their own conclusion as to how useful and so forth that they thought it was for them. And so everyone did that. They shared on socials. They told their friends and family. I got a ton of reviews. The goal was 50 in the first week, which we did. We got 51. And of course, I was over the moon with that, because that is no small feat. I mean, ask anybody who's tried to go through the process. It's like, people are busy. I get it. People are like, oh, wow, God, what was I supposed to do? It's a lot of time for someone to give. But people were so affirming, so gracious, so lovely, and so encouraging. People were like, oh, I love this. This is totally helping me. I feel like you're sitting in my living room. This is funny. Whatever it was, that they felt about it. So it was a really, really cool process. And folks are still doing it. Folks who weren't really able, not everybody's able to do it exactly then, but some folks are still going on and reading it. And by the way, any review, anytime, 10 out of 10, very helpful.
Yes. Yes. Well, and, first, congratulations, Cara, on the accomplishment of writing and publishing an incredible book, because that is huge.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for you. And also, the community that you have built around you, obviously, is more than happy to give back to you in this.
Yeah. And you were so, so lovely too. I mean, you were, one of my very enthusiastic folks who just told me your feedback too, just also on the side. Like, oh, this is great. I'm enjoying it. And I just love, anybody who creates something. It's like the greatest thing to receive that sort of feedback from the folks in your circle. So thank you so much, Carol.
Oh, well, it was truly my pleasure. Now, anything that you would do differently next time, or anything that you learned that you want to share?
Well, I would never work with that first group that I'd worked with. But you know what? If it hadn't all fallen through with them, I wouldn't have ultimately been introduced to Stephanie, who I found through the Ravel Collective, which is Cara Steinman, another one of your folks. It's who I met, by the way, on one of your other call events. She maybe just thought,
oh, maybe the alumni call.
It was some alumni call, because we were not in the same cohort. And she finds me and she's like, we have the same name. We must have something in common, which we do. We're both lefties. We both play guitar. It's really weird. But anyway, except I'm Cara and she's Cara. But anyway, it was through her that I found Stephanie. So it's just all of these women helping women, people that I have been very blessed to have in my life over the last year and 2 years have been pivotal, really, in where I am now. And if I don't think the book would be anywhere what it is without Stephanie and her team. So if we needed to burn through one set of knuckleheads to get to there, then I guess that's, what it needed to be.
Another life lesson, right?
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, it's been a really, really great process. I'm ready to write another one.
Oh, well,
And
that's
now
always good to hear.
yeah, now I kind of know the ropes. I'll be less of like a newborn duck, just sort of flapping around.
Yes. Well, then, okay, besides working on another book, what else is in the future? What are you looking to do in 2024?
So keep working with amazing clients, one-on-one and in groups, and kind of turn back to my speaking practice, speaking workshops, keynotes, etc., and do more of that. Now that I've got the book written, I have something very specific in terms of a thought leadership topic to pitch and talk with folks about. Working with more companies is something that's on my radar too. Turnover costs, I read turnover cost companies like an average of $55,000 a person. And burnout is a huge driver of turnover. And to the extent that folks can actually not just put lip service to it, but actually have real efforts and policies and resources and such towards, having healthy cultures and happy staff, I think that would be something I'd love to do.
That is a really great idea. I like that and much needed. That's fantastic. Well, definitely keep me posted on how things are going and how I can help you. Cara, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. All of you listening, make sure to go get Cara's book. The link is in the show notes. It's also at carahouser.com. So it's CARA and then like house, HOUSER.com. And you can get it shipped within a day or two. So if you happen to be listening to this the day the episode has come out on December 18th, you can still get it in time for the holidays, right?
Woo-hoo!
And that's a lovely gift package. Or you can get it at any time of the year. Make sure to go to Cara's website to get all the details on that. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
It's been such a fun time with you.
I hope this conversation has inspired you as much as it's inspired me to get working on your book. And of course, your overall thought leadership and public speaking is a major component of that. We work with women entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders to develop their thought leadership idea, much like we did with Cara, and we help you create your signature talk. We do this both one-on-one and in a group program. You can get all the details at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Until next time, thanks for listening.